Hey friends, I just got access to MakerSuite, which is Google's playground for their Bard API, which they're calling Palm, basically their large language model, similar to GPT or Chat GPT. So if you get into it, basically you have these three modules. One is text prompt, which is basically text completion. Another is data prompt, which is more of a table structure for generating large quantities of things and multiple variations and responses. And another is chat prompt, so similar to Chat GPT. So if we test these out, you can hop into it and write your own prompt here. They also have some samples, which we can test out. So we can go ahead and run one of these, click run, and it'll generate a response based on the input. So pretty simple. If we switch over to the data prompt, this one's a little different. It's sort of like giving examples with your prompt. So you can generate a bunch of input-output examples and then give a new input and it'll go ahead and generate one. So let's test out this travel agent example. I think this is interesting because it has multiple outputs. So here they're giving the input Athens. One of the outputs is the description of the location, and then another output is sort of a sales pitch based on that description. And so they give a bunch of different examples of this, and then you can go ahead and run this using Portland, Maine as the input and see the various outputs that it defines. So here it gives the description and then gives the sales pitch based on that description. So pretty neat, kind of, I feel like this is good for sentiment analysis. They also have this example where you can do opposites of a word and then generate the opposites. So those are some good examples of how you can use that. We can also use the chat example. So here you can just test out some pre-baked examples they have of user inputs and the model outputs, and then go ahead and interact with it the way it would. It also has this context prompt, which is similar if you use the GPT API, the system prompt, where you're describing how you want it to behave. So these are pretty fun. You can play around with them and see how it generates output similar to GPT. You can also go here and create an API key, and that's what we're going to play around with next. So you click here and get an API key set up, and then we can just play around with it. So they have this documentation where you can kind of go through the quick start guide. We're just going to go through this and set it up. So let's go ahead and run the commands here. We're going to install the auth library and then install the generative language package. Then we're going to also install .env so we can include that. Then we're going to copy all this in. And include .env so we can get our API key. So basically what we're doing is including the packages we need for this, specifying the model name, which in this case is TextBython 001, which is their text completion API, and then the API key, just authorizing the service with the client using our API key. Here we're adding a prompt. So their prompt is repeat after me 1, 2, and then we should get something like 3, 4. And then here we're actually calling the generate text method on the client, specifying the model, the prompt, and then we should get results, which is going to be a big JSON blob, and we're just stringifying that. So we should get a lot of data back. So let's go ahead and try this out. see what we get. There we go. So there's a lot of data in here. The key thing we want to look for is the output, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, which makes sense. So we can go ahead and change the prompt. And let's describe what it would be like to live on Jupiter and see what it says. Cool, so we're looking for the output here. Jupiter is the 5th planet from the sun, largest planet in our solar system. It's describing a lot about Jupiter, so sounds good. So now what I want to do is let's play with the Chat API. So we're gonna basically replace everything with this. So here we're going to ask it to respond to all the questions with a rhyming poem. We changed the model up here in this example, so they're using the Chat Bison model, and we're also using the Discuss service client instead. Initializing the API key, and then in this main method, we're calling the generate message method, passing in the model. The temperature will affect how creative the prompt is, or the response. The candidate count is how many examples you want, how many outputs you want from it, and then here's our prompt. So the prompt structure here is a little different. If you're familiar with the GPT API, they have this context, which is like your system prompt, how you want it to behave. And then they also have examples. So you can sort of feed it examples of how you want the inputs and outputs to look. And then they have your typical messages response with its content. So this is the prompt that you're going to feed it. And our output here is going to be just the text response. So instead of outputting all the JSON, we're just going to get the actual text. So let's try it out. So let's see if it rhymes. Meters tall is popular, not very small. Fair and care. Yeah, so it rhymes and it describes the Eiffel Tower. Cool. Cool. So yeah, so it just kind of shows how you can use their API to give inputs and outputs. I'm sure these things will evolve over time as they improve. Thanks for checking it out.